It always started with the whispering. Not the loud, obvious kind that made teachers stop mid-sentence, but the sneaky sort, murmurs that slid beneath the surface of everyday noise like snakes under dry leaves. Every time she walked into the classroom, the air seemed to tighten. Heads would dip just slightly, eyes would dart, and smirks would curl in corners of mouths that pretended innocence. Her name was Emily Wren. 16, quiet, all oversized hoodies and headphones. She kept her brown hair tied back in a lazy ponytail, her eyes always down, and her backpack slung so low it nearly dragged behind her. In the first month of junior year at Hargrove Prep, she had already become the girl people avoided at lunch but obsessed over in secret. Why? Because she was different, and no one at Hargrove liked different. Hargrove wasn't a regular school. It was a prestige mill, a breeding ground for the children of CEOs, senators, tech moguls, and Hollywood elites. The students came in wearing $1,000 sneakers, custom-blended perfumes, and the confidence of people who never had to worry about rent. Emily didn't fit. Not just because of her worn shoes or secondhand notebooks, but because no one could figure out where she came from. No Instagram, no TikTok. No family photos on Parent Day. No drivers waiting at pickup. Just her, walking the mile from the apartment complex on East Oliver Street, always with the same cracked phone in hand and the same silence cloaked around her like armor. It didn't take long before the rumors started. She lives in a shelter. Her dad's in prison. She's a scholarship kid. Probably stole someone's identity to get in. And like gasoline to a spark, the gossip spread, especially in the mouths of the elite. The worst of them? Savannah Blake. Savannah was everything Emily wasn't. Blonde. Popular. Rich. She drove a black Audi she didn't even have a license for and had 47K followers on Instagram, most of whom lived for her day-in-the-life posts featuring designer lattes and expensive lip gloss. Savannah had her own gravitational pull, and if she didn't like you, neither did anyone else. From the moment Emily refused to answer Savannah's first fake nice question, "So, what do your parents do?" It was war. It started small. Books missing from her locker. Her chair mysteriously disappearing before class. Someone accidentally spilling water on her art project. But then it got cruel. One Friday morning, just as Emily was sitting down, the overhead speakers crackled and Principal Howard's voice came on. "Emily Wren, please report to the office." Whispers started immediately. When Emily walked in, the secretary wouldn't meet her eyes. Inside the principal's office was a police officer. Her stomach dropped. "Emily," Principal Howard said, clearing his throat, "it's been brought to our attention that you may be violating Hargrove's code of conduct. Specifically, with regard to residency status and behavioral concerns." "What?" Her voice was dry, confused. "There's been an anonymous report that you've been trespassing on school property. And since your guardianship hasn't been verified." The words blurred after that. She heard them say, "expulsion hearing, safety concerns, and until further notice, you are no longer permitted on campus grounds." She walked out numb. Not just from the cold slap of injustice, but from the sting of knowing exactly who had pulled this off. Savannah. On her way out, Emily passed a group of girls in plaid skirts. One of them said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Buy charity case." And that was it. She was kicked out. No trial. No chance to explain. Just gone. Emily walked home that day under the weight of too many questions. How could a school expel someone on a rumor? How could Savannah wield so much power with just a whisper? And the one that stung the most, what now? Her dad was going to be furious. She didn't even know how to explain what had happened, especially since he wasn't the easiest man to talk to. But as she reached the front door of their modest third-floor apartment and pulled out her key, it opened before she could turn the knob. He was standing there. In uniform. And not just any uniform. Military. Decorated. Eyes like steel. Posture that could silence a room. "Emily," he said, voice low, "you're home early." Her heart thudded. There were very few times in her life when her father's tone scared her. This was one of them. "School. There was a thing," she stammered. They think I lied on the forms. Something about my address." His eyes narrowed. "And who told them that?" She hesitated. Then, "Some girl. Savannah Blake." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay." That was all he said. Just okay. The next day he disappeared. No note. No explanation. Emily spent the weekend alone, wondering if she had ruined everything. But then, Monday morning, something changed. It started with the convoy. A long black SUV pulled into the Hargrove parking lot. Then another. Then a third. By the time the school bell rang, half the faculty had left their posts to gawk at what looked like a government escort arriving at their private school steps. And then, he stepped out. Her father. But not just as dad. As Colonel Isaac Wren, the man who once led special intelligence operations for the Department of Defense. Decorated war hero. Strategic advisor to the Joint Chiefs. Holder of classified clearances no one at Hargrove could even spell. He marched straight into Principal Howard's office, armed with nothing but a briefcase and an expression that could melt steel. And suddenly, everything changed. The thing about power is, most people don't even know when they're standing next to it. At least not until it flexes. Principal Howard had no idea what hit him. One moment he was sipping his usual mint-infused green tea, checking attendance sheets, and rehearsing his speech for the Monday morning assembly. The next, there was a quiet knock on his door, and then a man walked in who looked like he owned not just the room but the air inside it. Colonel Isaac Wren didn't wait to be invited in. He stepped over the threshold with precision, a briefcase in one hand, the other casually resting against the inside of his blazer where something, Howard couldn't help but notice, might have been holstered. The colonel's boots clicked softly on the polished tile. He was calm, quiet, and terrifying in a way that didn't involve yelling. It was in the way he stood. Like he was used to commanding situations where people died if they hesitated. Howard blinked and stood up clumsily. "Can I help you?" "You may," the colonel said. "I'm here to speak to you about my daughter." Howard opened his mouth but couldn't find any words. "Emily Wren," the colonel clarified, placing the briefcase on the desk like it was made of gold. "You expelled her. On suspicion. No evidence. Based on an anonymous report." Howard tried to recover. "Sir, with all due respect, our school has a code of conduct. There was some confusion regarding her residency status." "And you didn't verify a single document," the colonel interrupted. "Didn't request a meeting. Didn't investigate. Just acted on a whisper. That's not a code. That's cowardice." Howard flinched. "Mr. Wren." "Colonel." That correction landed hard. The silence between them stretched long and wide. "I'm not here for an apology," Colonel Wren continued. "I'm here to correct a mistake. And to ensure you understand what happens if it isn't." He flipped open the briefcase. Neatly stacked inside were military files, sealed documents, copies of Emily's birth certificate, and a notarized residency affidavit showing Emily Wren's legal address within the school district. Signed, verified, and federally backed. But that wasn't what made Howard's mouth go dry. It was the letter on top. From the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Stamped eyes only. Clearance level 5. The colonel didn't say a word. He let the man read. When Principal Howard finally looked up, his face was pale. I had no idea. I'm deeply sorry, Colonel Wren. I assure you there was no malicious intent. I believe there's been a grave misunderstanding and I'll personally see to it that your daughter is reinstated immediately. With a formal apology. The colonel closed the briefcase. "I don't want an apology," he said coldly. "I want names." "Who filed the complaint?" It was anonymous." "Try again." Howard gulped. It came from a student. Savannah Blake." There it was. The colonel nodded once. "Thank you for your cooperation." And just like that he left. The fallout began by second period. Savannah had just finished posting a story on Instagram from the girl's bathroom mirror, captioned "Blessed and Unbothered Nail Polish," when she was called to the main office. She walked in all sunshine and swagger. But the mood shifted the second she saw two unfamiliar men in suits standing beside Principal Howard. One of them shut the door behind her. "Savannah Blake," the man said without smiling. "I'm Special Agent Marsh with the Department of Defense Civilian Affairs Unit. We'd like to ask you some questions." Her face dropped. "Am I in trouble?" "That depends," said the second agent. "Have you ever submitted a false report about another student to your administration?" Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I mean it wasn't false. I just heard stuff, people were talking." "Who exactly?" "I don't remember. I was just concerned. That's all." "Concerned enough to get someone expelled?" Savannah's bravado evaporated. She looked at Principal Howard for support, but the man suddenly seemed very interested in his stapler. "Your father," Agent Marsh continued, "sits on the board of LNX Corporation, correct?" Savannah nodded. "Did you know LNX holds multiple government defense contracts? That filing false allegations against the daughter of a high-level military official could be considered obstruction or defamation, especially when the report directly impacts educational access." She blinked like she'd been slapped. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Well, now you do. The agents handed her a form, an official notice of investigation, and walked out. And that, as they say, was the beginning of the end. By lunch, word had spread like wildfire. Everyone was talking about it. Emily Wren wasn't just some nobody from the wrong side of town. Her dad was a decorated colonel with security clearance that made national headlines. He'd worked in counterintelligence, cyber operations, even black ops units that didn't technically exist. He was the kind of man who disappeared for 6 months and came back with a new medal and no explanation. And suddenly everything changed. Girls who had snickered behind Emily's back now offered nervous smiles. Boys who had ignored her were now tripping over themselves to hold open doors. Teachers apologized awkwardly. One even offered her extra credit just in case. But Emily? She didn't respond. Not with words. She walked into school Tuesday morning wearing the same hoodie, the same ponytail, the same quiet resolve. She ignored the whispers. She ignored Savannah's stunned, terrified glances. She ignored the sudden hush that followed her like a shadow in every hallway. Instead, she headed straight for the art room. Because while the world tried to make sense of her transformation, from target to untouchable, Emily knew something they didn't. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. You see, the thing about being bullied isn't just the pain. It's the memory. The way it carves itself into your bones. The way it lingers in your muscles, your breath, your silence. And now that everyone knew who her father was, they thought she was safe. But Emily wasn't looking for safety. She was looking for justice. And justice, real justice, wasn't something you got by waiting. It was something you took. When justice starts to move, it's rarely loud. It starts as a vibration under the surface, a tremor just subtle enough that only the ones paying attention feel it. And in Hargrove Prep, where everything had always been predictable, perfect, and polished, that tremor came in the form of silence. Not the silence of boredom. Not the sleepy hush of a math lecture. But the kind of silence that meant someone important had walked in the room and no one knew what to say. Emily Wren didn't have to say anything. She didn't have to throw a tantrum, didn't have to threaten anyone, didn't even look angry. She just showed up. And somehow that was more terrifying than if she'd screamed. Savannah Blake felt it first. She'd always been the sun at Hargrove, hot, impossible to ignore, and dangerous to stare at for too long. But this week people stopped orbiting her. They started drifting. Friends who used to laugh at her snide remarks suddenly excused themselves. Teachers who once favored her turned neutral. Even her boyfriend, Zach, the Golden Boy lacrosse captain, had stopped liking her posts. And all of that might have been manageable, until the notes started showing up. At first they were subtle. Slipped into lockers. Tucked under cafeteria trays. Written in perfect, anonymous handwriting. Funny how power flips overnight, huh? You still think you're untouchable? Ever wonder what your father would say if someone looked into his secrets? Savannah laughed it off at first. Rolled her eyes. Tossed the notes in the trash. But there was something about them, something specific. They knew things. Things no one should know. Like how she'd stolen test answers last year. Or the quiet bribe her dad gave to the admissions board to get her into Hargrove despite her dismal GPA. Even the secret social account where she trolled girls anonymously for fun. One by one, the whispers stopped being rumors. They started becoming receipts. Screenshots. Recordings. Emails. Someone was building a case. And she knew exactly who. Emily had never been vengeful. Never even raised her voice. But now Savannah watched her like a haunted thing, every move laced with paranoia. Because now, for the first time ever, Savannah was afraid. Not just of Emily, but of the truth. And Emily? She was just getting started. The first time Emily spoke since her return wasn't in a classroom. It was at the weekly student council meeting, which she didn't even belong to. But she showed up anyway. The room went still the moment she walked in. All eyes turned to her as she stepped to the front of the room where Savannah sat, still clutching the position of student body president like it was the last life jacket on a sinking ship. I have something to say, Emily said simply. Savannah cleared her throat, attempting casual superiority. This is a closed meeting, actually. Then close it, Emily replied. Unless you're afraid. There it was. The challenge. The room crackled. The advisor, Mrs. Brighton, hesitated, then said, "Let's hear her out." Emily stepped forward, her hoodie sleeves pushed up, revealing the edges of scars that spoke of more than schoolyard cruelty. Her voice was calm even, but it rang through the room like a bell. I was kicked out because someone decided my presence made them uncomfortable. They didn't know me. They didn't ask. They just whispered and the system obeyed. She looked straight at Savannah. People think bullies win because they're loud. But they don't. They win because people are silent. Because no one speaks up. Because it's easier to stay liked than be right. She opened her backpack. Pulled out a folder. I've collected proof. Real proof. Of how this school looks away when the right families wave enough money around. How grades are changed. How students are favored. How one voice, one lie, can ruin someone's life. She set the folder down in front of Mrs. Brighton. I'm submitting this to the board. To the press. And to every parent who thinks their child is safe in this place. Savannah stood up, trembling. You can't do that. That's blackmail. No, Emily said, cool as winter air. That's justice. And she turned to leave. But just before she walked out the door, she stopped. You want to know who my father is? She said, her back still turned. He's not just a colonel. He's the kind of man who once tracked a war criminal across 3 continents without ever firing a shot. He taught me that power isn't in your voice. It's in what you do when no one is clapping. The door clicked shut behind her. The ripple effect was instant. By the next morning, 2 faculty members had taken leave. An emergency board meeting was called. And Savannah Blake's social media empire crumbled under the weight of exposed screenshots that circulated through anonymous Telegram groups faster than wildfire. Emily didn't gloat. She didn't post about it, didn't make speeches, didn't high-five anyone in the halls. She just did what she'd always done, put her head down and walked forward. But there was one thing she didn't expect. That others would start following. First, it was Liam, a soft-spoken boy from her art class who had once tried to disappear into his hoodie just like she did. He came up to her with a nod and a thank you he didn't quite say. Then came Yasmin, who'd once let Savannah humiliate her for the way she dressed. She started sitting with Emily at lunch, sliding her tray beside hers without a word. And then others. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just present. And for the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel alone. But she wasn't done. Because this wasn't just about her. It never was. It was about every kid who ever walked through Hargrove's doors and felt like their silence was the only way to survive. Every one of them who'd been whispered about, lied to, pushed aside, or told they weren't enough. She was going to build something. Not just revenge. A revolution. And she had just taken her first step. The revolution didn't begin with fireworks. It began with a clipboard. Emily Wren stood just outside the main entrance to Hargrove Prep, a breeze tugging gently at the sleeves of her hoodie, as she held a worn clipboard against her chest. Most students passed her without a second glance, still unsure what to make of the sudden shift in school politics. But change always starts slow. The top of the clipboard read, Petition for independent oversight of Hargrove academic conduct and disciplinary policy. At first, people just stared. Then came the first signature, Liam. He didn't say much. Just nodded and signed. His eyes said the rest. Yasmin followed. And soon, one by one, others began to step forward. Some cautiously, others defiantly. What they were signing wasn't just a piece of paper. They were signing a crack into the foundation of everything Hargrove had built. The petition was only step 1. Behind the scenes, Emily had begun documenting a trail, interviewing students anonymously, collecting stories, texts, even screenshots of grade changes and favoritism. With the help of her father's government contacts, she'd quietly learned how to structure her findings like an internal audit. She even had a pro bono lawyer, one of her father's old war buddies turned civil rights attorney, guiding her steps. But even as her movement gained momentum, Emily knew the storm hadn't passed. Because Savannah wasn't done. You see, people like Savannah Blake don't go down easily. They don't accept being dethroned. They retaliate. On a quiet Thursday afternoon, just as the sun turned the library windows gold, Emily opened her locker and found it. A manila envelope. No name. No handwriting. Just taped to the inside door like it had been waiting. She opened it and froze. Inside were photos. Dozens. Of her. Walking home. Sitting at a park bench. Standing at her apartment window. Taken from angles that made her skin crawl. And a single note written in thick black marker. Keep pushing and you'll disappear just like your mom did. Her knees buckled. The hall blurred. It wasn't just a threat. It was a dagger into her oldest wound. Her mother. Gone since Emily was 9. No body. No closure. Just one foggy memory of a rainy night, a knock on the door and her father falling to his knees. He never talked about it. Only said, she was taken. That's all you need to know. Now, someone had weaponized that grief. Emily stumbled into the bathroom and locked herself in a stall. Her heart slammed against her ribs like it wanted out. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The walls felt like they were closing in. Until her phone vibrated. A text. From her father. "Dad, stay calm. I'm handling it." How did he know? She hadn't told him. Another text seconds later. "Dad, trust me." That grounded her. Her father always knew. Always prepared. If he said trust, she would. But she couldn't stay silent anymore. The next morning, Emily called an assembly. No permission. No announcement. She just walked to the center of the school courtyard with a megaphone and stood on one of the stone benches. A crowd gathered quickly, curiosity, tension, and something else buzzing in the air. Hope. She raised the megaphone. "I was followed," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Photographed. Threatened." Murmurs rippled through the students. "I was told to back down or I'd end up like my mother. Missing. Erased." Gasps now. Real shock. Some students looked at each other. Others looked at the faculty standing awkwardly at the edges of the crowd. "I know who did it," Emily continued, locking eyes with Savannah, who stood frozen near the back. "And so do you." She pulled out her phone and projected the pictures onto the outdoor screen usually reserved for school announcements. The crowd saw them. Photo after photo. Emily. Alone. Washed. Haunted. Then came the last image. A grainy capture of someone holding the camera, reflected in a glass window. Savannah. Caught. Red-handed. The crowd exploded in sound, shouts, outrage, disbelief. Teachers moved in. Principal Howard appeared, pale as paper, demanding answers. But Emily had more. She reached into her bag and held up a flash drive. "This contains every piece of evidence collected over the past 3 weeks. Bullying, manipulation, academic fraud, threats. It's been submitted to the Department of Education, our school board, and every media outlet that will listen." Savannah bolted. But not fast enough. 2 security officers, real ones this time, intercepted her at the gate. Her screams were wild and incoherent. "You can't do this. Do you know who my dad is?" Emily stood silently as Savannah was led away, her voice echoing like a ghost through the courtyard. Funny how the powerful always scream the loudest when their power slips. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Hargrove became a media circus. Reporters outside the gates. News vans. Hashtag justice for Emily trending nationally. A special task force was assigned to investigate the school's administrative practices. Several teachers were placed on leave. A new principal was brought in, one with a background in education equity and student rights. But even with justice served, Emily didn't celebrate. She didn't dance in the hallways. She didn't post selfies or give interviews. Instead, she went home, closed her door, and sat with her father in silence. Until he finally spoke. "She was taken," he said softly. "Your mother." Emily nodded. "I figured. But by who?" He took a long breath. And then, for the first time in years, he told her everything. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge. Emily sat cross-legged on the worn-out couch, her eyes fixed on her father. The colonel, always unshakable, always composed, seemed different now. The edge was still there, the discipline, but it was softened by something else. Sorrow. He leaned back, fingers laced tightly, his jaw locked in thought. Then finally he looked at her. "I never wanted you to carry this," he said, voice low. "But maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's time you knew." Emily nodded slowly. Her heart thudded like a war drum. She had always known there was more to her mother's disappearance than the vague stories, the way her father would go cold at the mention of her name. Now she was about to learn the truth. "Her name was Amy," he began. "Amy Kane. But before she was my wife, before she was your mother, she was something else entirely." He reached for the drawer in the side table and pulled out a folder marked confidential. Yellowed. What? Sealed with tape so old it cracked when he opened it. Inside were photographs, files, and clippings. The first one Emily saw was a black and white photo of her mother, young, fierce-eyed, standing next to a man in a military uniform who wasn't her father. "She worked for ONYX," he said. Emily blinked. "Onyx? What's that?" "It's a shadow agency," he explained. "Not officially tied to the government. They handled operations too sensitive for even the Pentagon to acknowledge. Wet work, cyber infiltration, espionage against foreign and, sometimes, domestic threats." Emily swallowed hard. "You were both in it?" He nodded. "That's how we met. She was better than me, you know. Smarter. Faster. But when you were born she left. Said she was done. Wanted to raise you away from that life. He paused, his voice catching. But ONYX never lets anyone walk away. The silence returned, thick as molasses. She went missing during what should have been a simple intel trade, he continued. She was lured out by a former asset turned rogue, someone we thought we'd neutralized years before. Codename, Revenant. Emily's mouth went dry. Revenant. He nodded grimly. We never found her body. But I recovered a thumb drive from the site. And what I saw on it. He trailed off, then leaned forward. She didn't just disappear. She was taken as leverage. Because of me. Emily's mind spun. You think she's still alive? I know she is. He opened a drawer and pulled out a single USB drive. He handed it to her. I decrypted this last night. The threat against you wasn't just some teenage vendetta. It was a warning. Revenant is back. And they're using Savannah's father. Emily blinked, stunned. Wait, her dad. The colonel nodded. Richard Blake. On the surface, he's just another corporate executive. But we believe he's been laundering money for off-the-books paramilitary groups, funding ONYX offshoots still loyal to Revenant. It hit Emily like a sledgehammer. That explained everything. Why Savannah always acted untouchable. Why no one questioned her power. Why Emily was targeted so surgically. This wasn't high school drama. It was a cover operation. But why me? She asked, barely above a whisper. Her father looked at her with a weight that only warriors carry. Because you're the only person left who can get to them without raising alarms. They underestimated you. Just like everyone else did. She sat back, trying to process the shift from bullied student to pawn in a shadow war. But then, something inside her clicked. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. For the first time in her life, everything made sense. Every whisper. Every bruise. Every cold shoulder. It had never just been about her not fitting in. It was about keeping her quiet. Because someone knew who she was. And they were afraid. Emily leaned forward, looking her father in the eye. What do we do next? He smiled. Not with pride. With respect. You lead, he said. By Monday morning, Hargrove had returned to a strange version of normal. Students walked the halls with a newfound sense of hesitation, as if the truth had made the air heavier. Teachers were stricter, administrators cautious, and security doubled. But Emily? She was focused. She began organizing students into groups, not just for reform but for protection. She taught them to document, to encrypt, to share safely. With Liam's help, she launched an internal student network called Echo, a secure digital platform that allowed students to anonymously report abuse, misconduct, or even suspicious activity. It ran through a VPN her father helped code. What started as a petition became a movement. But beneath the reform, Emily had a parallel mission. Track Richard Blake. She didn't have proof yet, nothing that could hold in court, but she had patterns. His donation history to shady tech firms. His quiet acquisition of defunct security startups. And a series of encrypted messages Savannah had unknowingly left on a cloud backup, now recovered and decoded by Emily's growing team. They all pointed to something big. A meeting. A handoff. Coming soon. And her mother's name, Amy Kane, was in the files. Suddenly it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was rescue. It was exposure. It was war. Late one night, Emily met her father on the roof of their apartment building. City lights twinkled below. He handed her a headset. You sure you're ready? He asked. She nodded. No one's coming to save us, she said. So let's save ourselves. He smiled, slipped on his earpiece, and together they turned toward the dark horizon. Where Hargrove's lights faded into the secrets of the city. They were coming. And the world had no idea what was about to hit it. There are moments when a life splits. Moments when the quiet edges of reality peel back and the truth, raw and vast, is laid bare. For Emily, that moment came at 2:04 a.m. She was standing inside a forgotten tech lab on the outskirts of the city, an abandoned ONYX facility buried beneath what used to be a telecom warehouse. Her father was beside her, pistol drawn but lowered, flashlight sweeping across dust-caked consoles and broken servers. The air smelled of stale wires and mildew, and the silence felt wrong, like something was watching. They had traced the signal from Savannah's hacked cloud storage to this exact place. A string of geocoordinates buried in metadata led to this location. But what they found wasn't just a lead. It was a vault. Literally. Behind a hidden panel in the far wall was a biometric lock. Retinal scanner. Palm print. And a single narrow slot, just below the access screen, labeled in faint red letters, Black Key. Emily stared at it. What is it? She whispered. Her father's jaw tightened. The last lock. I've only ever heard of it. It's not just security, it's leverage. Whatever's behind that door, it's worth more than a dozen intel leaks. It could be what Revenant's been hunting all this time. But where's the key? He hesitated. It was supposed to have been destroyed. Your mother was the only one who ever had one. Emily froze. There was again her mother. Always at the center. Always the phantom shadow of the story. She reached for her bag, pulled out the flash drive her father had given her days ago. What if she left it for us? He looked at her, confused. I decrypted part of it, she explained. There was a coded image embedded in the drive. Not just files. A 3D model, like a data token. I thought it was a dead trail, but what if it's this? She knelt, pulled out her laptop, connected the drive, and ran a decryptor. Her father's flashlight flickered slightly as the screen glowed with soft blue light. Lines of code scrolled. An interface loaded. Then, with a click, a miniature projection flickered into the air. A black hexagonal prism with strange symbols etched across its surface. Emily's fingers danced across the keys. Rendering data replica. Converted to access format. Ready. She held her breath, plugged the device into the wall panel's USB port and waited. The slot glowed red, then orange, then finally green. Click. The vault door hissed and groaned as ancient gears unlocked. A rush of air escaped as the seal broke. Emily and her father exchanged a glance, then stepped inside. The room was smaller than expected. Just 12 feet wide. Lined with metal shelves and steel cabinets. But the center held a single pedestal. Upon it, a black binder. No label. No insignia. Her father opened it carefully like it might explode. Inside was everything. Photos. Audio transcripts. Names. Coordinates. Kill lists. Entire missions erased from military records. And at the heart of it all, proof of ONYX's darkest operation, Operation Mothlight. Emily read the file in stunned silence. Mothlight had been designed to disappear people. Not just enemies, not just foreign spies, but internal risks. Journalists, whistleblowers, even American citizens who knew too much. And one of the final names on the operation log? Amy Kane. Classified as asset turn liability. Neutralize or recontain. Emily's stomach turned. She knew, her father murmured. She found something out. About Revenant. About the funding pipeline. She was going to blow the whole thing open. Emily clenched her fists. That's why they took her. She's not dead, he said, scanning the last page. She was marked for recontainment. That means they needed her alive, for access for intel. If we can find the last holding facility listed. But the words stopped in his throat. Because suddenly behind them a voice spoke. I wouldn't do that if I were you. They turned. A tall figure stood in the doorway. Shadowed. Come. His face emerged slowly under the dim light, sharp cheekbones, graying hair, the kind of calculated coldness that came from decades of secrets. Emily knew the name before he said it. Revenant. He nodded once, politely, like a man greeting old friends. Colonel Wren, he said. Emily. You've both been busy. Her father raised his weapon instantly. You take one step closer. But Revenant didn't move. That's not necessary. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't be reading that file. Emily stepped forward, fury in her eyes. Where's my mother? Revenant tilted his head. Alive. And well, last I checked. But difficult to manage. She never did take orders easily. You kidnapped her. I preserved her, he said calmly. You don't understand what she was going to do. What she had to do. Operation Mothlight wasn't about silencing good people. It was about protecting civilization from its own collapse. Your mother lost sight of the bigger picture. Emily spat. You justify disappearing people by calling it protection? I call it necessary. You're a coward. You didn't flinch. And you're a child playing with tools you don't understand. Do you think justice wins because you shout loud enough? You have no idea what kind of world you're peeling open, Emily. But she didn't back down. I don't need to understand it all, she said. I just need to end you. He smiled. You think exposing me will fix things? No, she said. But it'll start something that can. Her father stepped closer. We're walking out of here with that file. Revenant didn't move. Didn't threaten. He simply pressed a button on the small remote in his palm. Behind him, footsteps echoed. 5 armed figures entered the vault room. Masked. Tactical gear. Laser sights. Emily's heart pounded. They were surrounded. But before anyone fired. Boom. The wall behind them exploded inward. A flash grenade erupted. Smoke poured through the room. Chaos. Gunfire. Screams. Her father grabbed her, pulled her down behind a console. And through the smoke, figures moved in. Not Owen Wax. Not Revenant's mercs. But Echo. Emily's network. Her people. Students with government parents. Kids who knew how to build code, crack systems, send alerts. They'd called in the cavalry. Liam appeared out of the smoke, gas mask on, dragging a soldier down with a stun baton. "Time to go," he shouted. Revenant vanished in the chaos. But the file, the vault, was theirs. They escaped through the side stairwell, blood pounding in their ears, lungs full of smoke, truth clutched to their chest like a living thing. That night, Emily sat in the middle of her bedroom, surrounded by classified documents, news reporters pounding at the apartment gate, and dozens of encrypted messages blinking on her laptop. Revenant was out there. Her mother was still missing. But the world had seen the first crack in the ONYX empire. She had opened the door. And now she wasn't just a bullied girl with a hoodie and a past. She was a threat. A symbol. And she was just getting started. The morning after the explosion, the world didn't wake up the same. It convulsed. News broke like a fever. Secret government program leaked by teen whistleblower. Former colonel and daughter accused of exposing Black Ops file. Is this the end of ONYX? And finally, where is Amy Kane? Emily Wren's name, once buried beneath high school ridicule and whispered slurs, now flooded every major news network, blog, podcast, and political roundtable in the country. They called her the girl who opened the vault. But she didn't feel victorious. She felt watched. Her father was already 3 steps ahead. He had encrypted their location, relocated them to a military safe house on the outskirts of Portland, and assigned 2 trusted men from his former unit, Diego and Rain, to stand watch. Emily wasn't allowed outside without a disguise. The air felt tighter now, like every shadow had weight. But hiding was never the plan. Broadcast or die. That's what the text read. It came from someone known only as Sparrow. A digital ghost, someone Emily's Echo team had been trying to track for months. Sparrow had access to backdoors in government systems, news channels, and private security servers. They had been leaking breadcrumbs, clues, ever since Emily first went public. Whoever they were, they wanted the truth out as much as she did. But this message was different. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a deadline. Sparrow wanted her to go live. Worldwide. With the file. The truth about ONYX. About Revenant. About the list of names her mother died to protect. Emily stared at the flash drive in her hand, thumb hovering over the upload key. Could all end, or begin, with a single stream. But then something happened that made her blood run cold. Rain burst into the room, breathless, eyes wide. They found her. Emily stood so fast her chair clattered backward. Where? A medical black site. Ukraine. A clinic that doesn't officially exist. A drone pinged facial recognition last night. Matches your mom with 89% certainty. It's her. Her hands trembled. We have to go. Her father appeared in the doorway, already gearing up, his jaw clenched like stone. We are. But missions like this weren't fast. Not when you were up against ghosts. The plan came together in 36 hours. They'd have to fly under radar, literally, through a private charter rerouted through Berlin, then into an unregulated airfield in western Ukraine, and finally cross into the Carpathian Forest by foot. The clinic wasn't on maps, and from satellite images, it was underground, deep beneath a fortress of steel, surveillance, and old Cold War infrastructure. But there was one crack. Every 3 days at precisely 2:17 a.m. local time, the facility's uplink went live for 13 minutes to transmit biometric logs to a server in Geneva. That moment was their window. Emily suited up. Not in armor, not in Kevlar. In her hoodie. It felt right. A reminder of who she was. Who she'd always been. They moved under the cover of darkness. No words. No breathing too loud. Only the sound of boots against snow and static whispers in their earpieces. Diego led point, Rain swept the perimeter, and Colonel Wren flanked Emily like a silent wall of resolve. When they reached the perimeter fence, Emily crouched and pulled out her tablet. Echo, she whispered into the mic, talk to me. Liam's voice crackled in her ear. You're live. I've spoofed the camera feeds for the next 7 minutes. Get to the south hatch. You'll see a keypad. Input code 9-3-4 Delta 0. Emily moved. Her fingers danced. The keypad blinked once. Then the hatch hissed open. They were in. The facility was worse than Emily imagined. Dark corridors lined with wires that pulsed like veins. Rooms with steel doors labeled only in ciphers, Greek letters, strange symbols. And the smell, like bleach and death. They swept past surgical bays, data centers, and what looked like cryopods, each with someone inside, sedated, forgotten. And then, room Theta 9. The door was reinforced. But the tablet showed life signs inside. One subject. Female. Mid-40s. Emily's heart twisted. "It's her," she whispered. "Open it." Her father nodded. Rain set the charges. 3, 2, 1. Boom. Smoke. Flash. And then silence. Emily stepped in slowly, her vision adjusting. There, in the center of the room, was a bed. And on that bed, thin, pale but alive, was a woman with tangled dark hair, and 4 in her arm, and a scar running from temple to cheek. Emily couldn't breathe. "Mom?" The woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. And then, through the haze, she smiled. "Emily," she rasped. "You look just like him." Emily collapsed into her mother's arms. Tears. Tremors. Relief. It was her. Amy Kane. Not a ghost. Alive. But the moment shattered seconds later. Alarms blared. Red lights pulsed. They had been found. "Extraction now," the colonel barked. "Move." Diego carried Amy. Emily covered their rear, adrenaline pounding. They ran through corridors that now pulsed like arteries bleeding sirens. Echo shouted in their ears, 3 hostiles inbound, north hallway. Camera loop failing in 90 seconds. Gunfire erupted behind them. Rain dropped to a knee, returning fire. They reached the hatch. Burst through. But not before Revenant's voice echoed through the facility speakers. "I warned you, Emily. Now the world will burn for your truth." They escaped. Just barely. By sunrise they were back in Berlin, hunkered in an underground bunker known only to ex-Intel operators. Amy was stable. Weak but alert. And in her hands she held something, a drive embedded in her wrist during capture. The original black key. With everything. Every crime. Every name. Every location. Emily plugged it into her system. Files unfurled. Revenant's network. Blake's offshores. Politicians. Media moguls. Generals. It was all here. She looked at her father. He looked at her. And for once he didn't speak like a soldier. He spoke like a father. "This is your moment, kiddo. What you do next shapes the world." Emily took a deep breath. Then went live. It was a midnight stream. One URL. Sent through encrypted messages, forums, news feeds, even the dark web. Emily Wren. What? Uncensored. She spoke with her mother beside her, her father just off camera. And she told the world everything. About the school. The bullying. The threat. The vault. Her mother. The ONYX blacklist. The disappearance machine. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just told the truth. And when the file began uploading to public archives, the view count skyrocketed past 5 million. Then 10. Then 50. Governments scrambled. Agencies panicked. News anchors stammered on live air. But the people? They listened. Because she wasn't just a voice. She was every kid who had ever been silenced. Every truth that had ever been buried. And now she was unstoppable. The girl who had been kicked out, bullied, erased, had become the spark that set the world on fire. History doesn't announce itself when it arrives. It walks in quietly through doors no one's watching. And when it changes everything, it rarely looks how you imagined. The world didn't end after Emily's broadcast. But something broke. By the morning after, government agencies were thrown into chaos. Investigations launched globally. Public trust collapsed like rotted scaffolding. And everywhere, from Capitol Hill to coffee shops in Seoul, people were talking about Emily Wren. Her name became a headline. A symbol. A threat. But not everyone called her a hero. National security risk or brave whistleblower? Traitor or truth teller? Teenage girl wrecks global intelligence network. Should she be tried as an adult? The smear campaign was swift. Media operatives loyal to ONYX's shadow network painted her as an unstable teen manipulated by radical elements. Her father, they claimed, was a disgruntled veteran with a vendetta. Her mother, a mentally unwell former operative. But the people didn't buy it. Because Emily had receipts. And every single one was public. By the end of the week, a special session of the United Nations was convened. It had never happened before for a private citizen. But Emily wasn't private anymore. She was summoned, voluntarily, to speak before the International Tribunal for Unregulated Operations, a body hastily resurrected from Cold War dust to handle the fallout of ONYX and their global puppet strings. The trial was set in The Hague. Behind guarded walls and high towers, in a hall built to judge war criminals, Emily would now speak truth to the world. And the world would decide. The night before the hearing, she sat alone in her hotel room, hands folded, staring at the city lights. Her mother rested in the next room. Her father stood watch by the window as always. But for once he said something first. "You're not a kid anymore." Emily didn't look at him. "Was I ever?" He smiled sadly. "No. But I wanted you to be." She swallowed. "Are we doing the right thing?" His hand came to rest on her shoulder. "We're doing the only thing." The next morning the world watched. Cameras lined the gates. Journalists screamed questions. Inside, the tribunal chamber was packed. Judges from 15 nations, intelligence officers, defense lawyers, and observers from the media and civil rights groups. Emily took the stand. No lawyer. No script. Just her. Her voice rang through the chamber like the clearest morning bell. She walked them through everything. Her expulsion, the threats, the discovery of ONYX, her mother's captivity, the underground vault, Revenant, the Black Key. She didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She just told the truth. And then she looked the tribunal straight in the eye. "I'm not here to be famous. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I was never supposed to survive this. Because a system designed by fear thought I would stay quiet. Because my silence was their insurance policy." She paused. "And now I'm their liability." A hush fell over the room. Then the defense lawyer for ONYX stood. "Well," shaking. "I object to this entire testimony. The girl is not qualified to." "Objection overruled," one of the judges said without hesitation. The ruling was unanimous. The files Emily released were real. The threats were real. And ONYX was officially designated a rogue shadow entity in violation of international law. The tribunal ordered full declassification and immediate dismantling of its global operations. Sanctions followed. Raids. Arrests. Revenant's name hit every intelligence blacklist across NATO. He went dark, but the world was watching now. Emily Wren had made the invisible visible. And no one could unsee it. But power never dies quietly. While Emily testified, something else moved in the dark. Richard Blake, the same man who funded Savannah's privileges and who bankrolled Revenant, vanished. His company filed for bankruptcy overnight. Then came the explosions. A data center in Prague burned to the ground. An evidence vault in Nevada was reduced to ash. And a private prison in Morocco, allegedly used by ONYX to recondition assets, was mysteriously evacuated before inspectors arrived. The shadows were trying to erase themselves. Emily knew what that meant. Revenant was still out there. And he was cleaning house. 2 days after the trial, as Emily and her family prepared to fly back to the States, she received a message. No subject. No sender. Just a video. She hesitated, then pressed play. It was her. Not recent. Grainy footage. She looked 13. On the school playground. Sitting alone under a tree. The camera zoomed in. Then pulled back. To reveal someone watching from behind the fence. Revenant. His voice came through the static like a breath. "You think it's over? But we were always watching, Emily. Always grooming you. You're not the end of this story. You're just the next chapter." Then, the screen went black. Emily stared. Her mother walked in, reading the look on her face instantly. "What is it?" Emily held up the phone. "He's baiting us." Her mother nodded. "He's trying to pull you into a trap." Her father entered, arms crossed. "Or he's scared. Scared you'll go deeper." Emily stood slowly, her voice firm. "Then let's make him afraid for real." The next day, Emily released a new file. Not a leak this time. A blueprint. A call to action. She called it the Lighthouse Protocol. A digital roadmap for students, whistleblowers, and citizens everywhere to anonymously report abuse, surveillance, corruption, and link those reports into a verified chain of evidence that couldn't be erased, altered, or silenced. It was the ultimate failsafe. The ultimate watchdog. Powered by her generation. It spread like wildfire. And just like that, Revenant no longer hunted in silence. The world had its eyes wide open. By now, Emily had stopped asking for justice. She was building it. Brick by digital brick, node by encrypted node, the Lighthouse Protocol spread faster than even she had imagined. What started as a simple hub for safe whistleblowing became a global architecture of resistance. In less than a week, students from over 40 countries joined. Activists, journalists, ex-military officers, coders, lawyers, even defectors from ONYX, all united under one unspoken banner. No more shadows. The system was simple but bulletproof. Each report, whether about school bullying, police overreach, corporate corruption, or intelligence violations, was verified through cross-source data, encrypted twice, and then chained to a public digital ledger that could not be altered or destroyed. It was blockchain-based, decentralized, and open source. It was truth that couldn't be killed. But that made Emily a bigger target than ever. She knew it, and she was ready. The first major attack came in the form of a cyber assault, 37 hours after Lighthouse went public. Servers crashed. Fake reports flooded the chain. Bots deployed disinformation campaigns. Someone even sent a deep fake of Emily allegedly meeting with foreign enemies, trying to discredit her in front of the global press. It failed. Because Lighthouse wasn't a server. It was thousands. Every student who joined became a node. Every node was a shield. Lighthouse didn't rely on trust. It relied on code. On transparency. On people with nothing to gain and everything to lose if the system fell. And that's why it worked. Still, Emily never let her guard down. She spent every waking hour scanning reports, coordinating teams, speaking through encrypted feeds to allies in war-torn countries, poor districts, even private academies like Hargrove. It wasn't about her anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. But her enemies still hadn't learned that. Because Revenant struck again. And this time, he made it personal. It was 3:27 a.m. when the alert hit. Emily sat bolt upright in her bed, her phone vibrating like it was panicking. Unknown access attempt detected at node 014, Oregon. She blinked. Node 014. Her childhood home. The place her father swore they'd never return to. She tapped into the security feed. What she saw made her heart stop. A man in black body armor stood on the front porch. Helmeted. Rifle slung across his chest. Another figure joined him, taller, broader, dragging something behind him. It was a body. A teenager. Bloodied. Emily scrambled to get closer to the screen. The camera feed cut. Static. Her heart plummeted. She opened her secure comms and called Rain. He answered instantly. We saw it too. We're mobilizing. It's not just a scare tactic. What do you mean? They're hitting 10 Lighthouse nodes tonight. Coordinated. We've already lost 2. Emily stood. I'm going to Oregon. No, you're not, her father said from the doorway. Fully geared. Already expecting her answer. You're going with us. They moved fast. Private transport. Untraceable signals. Every inch of their route mapped, firewalled, and ghosted by Echo's tech team. By the time they reached the old house, flames were licking the sky. The front door had been kicked in. The garage collapsed. The backyard, the one Emily used to ride her bike in, was nothing but ash. But it wasn't the house that gutted her. It was the body on the lawn. Yasmin. One of the first girls who believed in her. One of the earliest Lighthouse coders. Her hoodie was soaked in blood. And pinned to her chest was a note. Scrawled in the same sharp, cruel strokes as before. Your light blinds us. We prefer the dark. Emily dropped to her knees. Her hands trembled. But not from fear. From rage. She looked up, eyes burning. No more warnings, she said. We find him. We end this. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. Her mother crouched beside her, silent. We know where he's heading next, her father said. We intercepted chatter on his ghost net. Where? Emily whispered. Geneva. Of course. The Global Communications Summit. 3 days from now, heads of state and corporate giants would gather to talk about information regulation. Revenant didn't want regulation. He wanted chaos. Silence. Control. And Emily knew what that meant. He would try to destroy the core of Lighthouse publicly, to prove no system was immune. To terrify the world into surrendering its voice again. But she wouldn't let him. She couldn't bring Yasmin back. But she could make sure no one else died for truth. They mobilized. Echo, now over 3,000 strong, activated their final wall plan. Every code name went dark. Every IP address ghosted. Every node rerouted. Emily flew to Geneva disguised as a junior press assistant, wearing a wire, a decoy ID, and a portable satellite uplink in her jacket. Revenant wouldn't know she was there. Not until it was too late. The summit was held at the Palais des Nations, a fortress of glass and marble overlooking Lake Geneva. Security was tight. But Emily wasn't breaking in. She was invited. Because the world wanted to hear from her now. She stood in front of a microphone in the main hall, journalists packed like sardines, cameras flashing, dignitaries watching with narrowed eyes. She began to speak. About truth. About systems designed to erase people. About the cost of silence. And as she did, behind her, the giant screen meant for projections flickered once. Then again. Then switched feeds. To a live stream. Revenant. In the control room. What? His voice filled the chamber. So predictable, Emily. Chaos exploded. Guards shouted. Attendees screamed. Revenant smiled. I told you this wasn't over. This is your last warning. But Emily stepped forward. Come. Collected. She tapped her earpiece. Echo, she said. Now. Across the globe, lighthouse nodes lit up. And the live stream, his live stream, was hijacked. By her. His own speech was replaced. By footage of every ONYX black site. Every erased person. Every dollar funneled through corporate shells. Receipts. Faces. Voices. And finally, his own face, unmasked, pulled from a hard drive recovered during the Ukraine op. The room froze. He was exposed. Every camera streamed it live. And Revenant? He didn't smile anymore. He slammed a fist into the console, snarled like an animal, and disappeared. But the damage was done. Emily had used his own words, his own vanity, his own broadcast, against him. The light he feared had found him. And it burned. That night, Geneva glowed with candlelight. Not from electricity outages, but from vigils. Thousands of people stood outside the Palais with phones in the air, showing Emily's speech, playing her words on loop. It wasn't just a speech. It was a signal. The girl who had been kicked out, bullied, stalked, and hunted, had outlived her enemies, and taught the world how to fight. The day after Geneva didn't feel like victory. It felt like the space between storms, the air heavy, the world holding its breath. Revenant had vanished again. No chatter, no signal, no trace. He'd slipped through the cracks as ghosts do. But this time he wasn't hiding in shadows. He was hiding in history. Because now every camera knew his face. Every intelligence agency knew his name. Every parent, every teacher, every student, they knew what he represented. And they weren't afraid anymore. Because of her. Emily Wren. The girl who had once sat alone in the cafeteria. Who had been kicked out for causing trouble. Who had been followed, threatened, erased. Now stood at the center of a global shift. A quiet revolution. But change isn't a moment. It's a choice. Repeated. Protected. Fought for. And Emily knew the fight wasn't over. It was just evolving. 3 weeks later, back in the States, Emily stood on the lawn of Hargrove Prep. Not as a student. As a guest. A keynote speaker. The school had been flipped inside out. The old principal resigned. The board was replaced. A coalition of parents demanded sweeping reforms, and not just for Hargrove but for every school in the district. Because what happened to Emily could have happened to any of their children. She walked past the same lockers where they used to whisper about her. Past the same stairwell where her art project was dumped in the trash. She didn't feel bitterness. She felt clarity. Inside the auditorium, hundreds waited. Students, parents, faculty, even state officials. The spotlight hit her as she stepped up to the mic. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't wear a suit. She wore her hoodie. The one that once marked her as invisible. Now iconic. She looked out across the crowd. And she smiled, not with triumph, but with truth. I was bullied, she began. I was silenced. Not just by students, but by a system that didn't know what to do with a girl who didn't fit. Murmurs rippled through the seats. But I'm not here today because I was strong, she continued. I'm here because I was seen. First by one friend. Then by a few. Then by a movement. She paused. I didn't tear down ONYX. We did. Lighthouse isn't mine. It's yours. And it only works if you keep it alive. If you protect the truth when it's inconvenient. When it's scary. When it costs you something. She let the silence breathe. Don't be the person who waits to care until it happens to you. Be the light before the darkness comes. A beat. And then the crowd erupted. Not with cheers. With a standing ovation. Because it wasn't about Emily anymore. It was about the idea she'd given them. A new kind of strength. One that whispered, you matter. You're not alone. Speak. Later that night, back at the apartment, she sat on the rooftop with her father and mother, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The stars were clear. Peaceful. Her mom leaned against her. You did it. Emily shook her head. We did. Her father sipped his coffee. You know, there's a proposal to make Lighthouse an official global platform. The UN wants to fund it. A few countries want to regulate it. Emily raised an eyebrow. They want to control it? He smirked. They want to understand it. Good luck with that, she said. They sat in silence for a while, the wind brushing past like a quiet song. Then Emily's phone buzzed. A message from Sparrow. No words. Just coordinates. And a symbol. The Revenants. Her breath hitched. She showed it to her father. He nodded. Looks like he wants one last dance. Emily stood slowly. Unfolded the blanket from her shoulders. The stars reflected in her eyes. Then let's finish the story. They didn't know where it would end. But that's the thing about lighthouses. They don't chase the storm. They stand in it and shine. Even when no one's watching. Even when the world forgets. Because someone somewhere will always need to find their way home. And Emily Wren was the girl who lit the fire that could never be put out.